Hi, everyone. Welcome to Solaris's Summer of Love. I am your host, MC Solaris, paranormal romance author of the Orion's Order series, which, you guessed it, is all about love. I am so excited and honored to introduce you to a very special guest. This is someone whose work came to me at the perfect time in my life. This is someone who opened my eyes and taught me so much about the wisdom of the female body. This is someone whose work changed my life and provided me with a foundational knowledge base of the female body and fertility cycles, some of which inspired elements woven into the Orion's Order books that I write. This is someone who I had an amazing opportunity to learn from, and someone who I consider a mentor, teacher, badass boss lady, blazing a path forward in the name of the feminine. So without further ado, please meet Nicole Jardim. Nicole is a certified women's health coach, writer, mentor, and the creator of Fix Your Period, a series of programs that empower women and menstruators to reclaim their hormone health using a method that combines evidence-based information with simplicity and sass. Her work has impacted the lives of tens of thousands of people around the world in effectively addressing a wide variety of period problems, including PMS, irregular periods, PCOS, painful and heavy periods, missing periods, and so much more. She is the author of Fix Your Period, 6 Weeks to Banish Bloating, Conquer Cramps, Manage Moodiness, and Ignite Lasting Hormone Balance. Welcome, Nicole. Hello.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me. Oh my goodness, that is quite an intro. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, I'm really like, whoa, I need to have this girl hanging out with me every day, boosting my ego. Oh, geez.
Thank you. Well, I mean, it's just, when I was writing the little blurb for the intro, it just came out and I was like, wow, everything about, anyways. So I'm so excited to be here, you guys, to talk about and share about how we physically feel and emotionally feel in each phase of our cycles as feminine beings, and how it can tie into our relationships, like relationships with someone you're newly dating, or someone in an existing partnership, or even just really all kinds of relationships. I'm so stoked to talk about it, and how it all ties into pretty much every aspect of our lives. So
absolutely. I could not agree with you more. I feel like this is one of those things that we don't have any idea how much it ties into every aspect of our lives. And we walk around completely ignorant to the fact that our menstrual cycles are basically life and they define so much of who we are and how we live our lives. And yet we don't have any information at all about it. And it's really unfortunate. And as you said in your really lovely intro of me, to learn this is to learn yourself. It's to learn the magic of your body, and no one can ever take that away from you. And it is so deeply empowering, and the knowledge that you gain will serve you for decades to come, no matter what phase of the menstrual life cycle that you're in.
Or what you're doing, right? I mean, when I first obviously maybe it's not obvious for those who don't know me that well, but I am a certified women's health coach, and I studied with Nicole. And so I was on this whole path of my life of women's health. And then all of a sudden now I'm a romance author, and one would be like, they have nothing to do with each other. But yet when I'm writing these characters and I'm writing relationships, and it comes up, it literally is in every aspect of our lives, no matter what you're doing. It's, our hormones and our cycles, well, maybe we start with that, is what kind of emotions do we feel throughout the cycle?
Throughout the cycle. Okay. Just excuse my dog. He's behind me crying because of the thunder and lightning outside. I apologize to anyone who's watching. He's pretty cute though, so it's forgivable. Okay, so let's talk about these phases of the cycle. You know, it's so interesting. I was actually just having this conversation with someone the other day, and we were talking about the fact that when anyone hears that, when they hear the cycle or whatever, all they really think about is menstruation. And yet that's only one phase of your cycle. And yet that's all we really know. And, and I kind of joke and I also say this seriously, but that's just one part of it. And it's not even the most important part. Ultimately, ovulation is the most important part. You guys. And, and it's one of those things where I feel like if we have that information, it can totally change everything for us. And I said this already, but it's so cool because then we start to be able to see patterns in our behavior and our physical health as we start to get to know our cycles better. So the 4 phases include menstruation, I call it the non-bleeding portion of the follicular phase, because menstruation is technically in the follicular phase. And then we have ovulation, and then we have the luteal phase, which is the final phase of the cycle. And then we start everything over again. And what's so incredible about this is that these phases have very distinct physical and emotional characteristics. And if we start to track our cycles, which I know you talk a lot about this, even in romance novels, this is something that you now gain a deeper understanding of how your body functions and what's going on with your hormones. That's what's so amazing about this, is that when I think about all the time and effort and energy and I don't know, the money that we spend on hormone testing or trying to get hormone testing, and then it's not even done correctly in the first place. You could track your cycle and learn so much about what's going on with your hormones. So we have these 4 phases, and that menstruation phase, it's so funny, people say, oh, you're so hormonal during that time. And I'm like, well, that's actually not accurate, because our hormones are the lowest that they will be in our whole cycle during that time. So if anyone tells you that, tell them that they're not correct. They don't understand how cycles work. But yeah, so this is a time where your hormones, the sex hormones, that is, so estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and actually a few others too that are sort of in sync with the cycle, are at their lowest, and they're going to start to build up as the cycle progresses, as you approach ovulation, which I consider to be like the pinnacle, the star of the show. And so during this time, we really don't have a lot of energy. I mean, when you think about when you get your period, it's your body literally saying to you, it's time to slow down, take a rest, sister, just take a moment to take care of yourself, because you're actually bleeding and you're not going to die. So it really is a good time, if you have the capacity to do that, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes out of your day, to just acknowledge that this is what's happening with your body right now. And, it's a big deal. And not just try and power through. And so I always say, like, your moods are going to be kind of lower at this time. You're going to feel really introspective, introverted. You're going to just feel like you're very inward, and that's totally normal. And, I always recommend during this time, don't go out of your way to plan meetings or plan big events or parties or anything like that, or dates or any of that, because really your energy is, like I said, so inward. And then, we move out of this phase into the non-bleeding follicular phase. And that's really the time where you'll start to notice shifts with your mood and your energy and just your general personality. We joke, right? And I know we do this with our partners, that we're kind of different people every week of the cycle. I'll get to the funny part in the luteal phase, what Hayden, my partner, says to me. But it's this time of your cycle that I feel like a lot of us look forward to. So that little follicle, well, there's multiple follicles on your ovaries, and those follicles are starting to build, and they're basically releasing estradiol, which is your main estrogen. And that estrogen is starting to pump you up a little bit. It's bringing up your energy, and it's making you feel a little bit more outward and outward facing to the world. And so that happens, and then we move into the ovulation part of the cycle, and this little follicle that has been chosen, the chosen one, is now pumping out a ton of estradiol. You're also making a lot of testosterone, so life is really good. Your mood is usually should shift significantly. Your energy changes too. You actually, interestingly too, you feel leaner at this time in your cycle because you don't have as much of an appetite. Estrogen is kind of an appetite suppressant, so it's always kind of nice. And you want to do things where you're exerting energy. So I feel like that's that time of the cycle. Some of us don't necessarily feel like that, and I think we can get into more details about that later on. But that's just acknowledge that it could go one of 2 ways. And then after ovulation happens, so the egg is released, it travels down the fallopian tube. It's either fertilized or not, more often than not, not fertilized. And then from there, you move into the luteal phase. And this is a longer phase, usually somewhere between 10 and 17 days, somewhere around there. And what happens is your energy sort of goes like this, essentially, or it might go like this. And that happens to some of us because when we make these lovely hormones during ovulation, sometimes they just drop really fast. Or progesterone, this hormone in the second half of your cycle, doesn't kick in enough. So you tend to think there's a cross. And so what happens is some of us don't feel it as much, but others might feel like we kind of fall off a cliff a little bit in terms of our moods. And then from there, when progesterone kicks in, it is very mood, brain supportive. It's like a cognitive function, hug to your poor little brain and nervous system. And if we don't have enough of it, we'll definitely feel it. And that's, where the traditional PMS, I'm so bitchy, you're so hormonal at this time of the cycle comes in. It's really unfortunate because, as you well know, this is a time in our cycles where we're so reflective and we're thoughtful and we're really thinking through our decisions in life and what's going on in our lives in this moment, and are things working, and if they're not working, we're very sensitive to that. And the tendency is to lash out a little bit at the people around us, especially when things are not working the way we want them to, or we're extremely stressed. I had a really good friend last year tell me that she felt like she was borderline Pmdd, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And so that's sort of like a meaner version of PMS. And so what's happening is it's actually characterized as a psychiatric disorder, but essentially what's happening is your moods feel so out of your control. Like you feel as though you're going through a mini depression every month. It's really intense for a lot of people. And what's really interesting is that she'd founded a company and she was so burnt out. I mean, it had been years and years of hustling. She was super burnt out. She didn't want to do it anymore, but she hadn't admitted it to herself as yet. But her body was like, listen, lady, this is what's up. And so this is the thing. And I know you know this, Marina, we're so detached from what's happening with our menstrual cycles and our physicality that we don't see these signs. Like we don't even know to look for them. But when I feel like, and this is not to downplay something like PMDD by any means, but I feel like when things get exponentially worse and nothing has really changed, usually you have to start looking a little bit deeper. Right below the surface, things start to show up. And so she took a sabbatical and ended up stepping down from her position, and her moods completely shifted. And that's not to say it happens with everyone this way, but I've seen this enough to know that when we as females, when we tap into that premenstrual rage, literally, because that's what it can feel like, we really start to see what's working and what's not working. And this is an incredible tool that we have at our disposal if we so choose to explore it. The joke that I had about the luteal phase was Hayden, my partner, he jokes that it's during the luteal phase, it's him, Nicole, and Luteal. So she's got her own personality. And, I mean, I can understand that, especially during writing my book. It was pretty bad. But it was, again, very much reflective of the external environment around me and the situation I was in that was sort of being reflected in the feelings and behavior and everything during that part of the cycle. And then at the end of all of this, progesterone and estrogen drop and you get your period. And then we do it all over again. It's so exciting. That was a long-winded way of saying all that, but yes.
No, that's fine. It's good because it layers like the foundation of, I feel like for everyone. So if you didn't know that, that's literally what our bodies go through every cycle. And it's like this, to parallel it back to, I guess, our own lives and even like books, it's like, we're literally going through our own hero's journey, like every cycle. And so it's like, we have our beginning, we go to the climax, which is like the ovulation phase. And we're like, everything's all crazy. But it's like not hormonally, but we're all just, everything's heightened. And then it kind of drops back off. And then we go into the reflective, like, oh, we just saved the world. Like what just happened? Like, and what are we going to, do next with our lives? What's the next episode? And then it's kind of, we start over again.
That's a really good point. I know, right? I guess we should call it the heroine's journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. The badass heroine's journey.
Totally. That's amazing.
And
Yeah.
so to talk about the sorry, to go back to your Nicole, Luteal, and Hayden.
Yes.
So my sister and I, two things. When I was actually in your course, I learned one of the phrases that you said was like, do you feel like you want to go to divorce court every month or like every cycle? Yes. And so whenever my sister and I are in the luteal phase, or like right before our periods, something happens emotionally, like you said, and we get like, we're just so sensitive, and something blows up, or something happens and we snap out. My sister calls it, for me, it's Dragon Week. So it's Dragon Week for me. Technically it's not a week, but you know what I mean? I just call it Dragon Week. And then for her, I always am like, are you about to go to divorce court? Because it's always every month, Oh
my goodness, that is so good. Yeah. Yep. That sounds about right.
It's really so true.
I think it is for a lot of people. And like you said, we really just, if we start to pay attention though, our bodies are always talking to us. That's the thing that we just don't know, right? Because we have effectively been taught to fare our bodies from the time we're little girls, right? We go to the doctor. Hopefully the doctor is going to make things right with whatever problem that we have. And then we start to hit puberty and we might not get the information that we really need. And based on what my friends who have kids at that age are telling me about sex ed these days, clearly nothing has changed. And, so we don't get this information, but we're constantly told or reminded of the fact that we can get pregnant at any time. And that's what you should be afraid of. And so we're going to take medication to shut that whole system down. And then we'll talk when you're 35 or whenever you want to have a baby. And that's the gist of what we're here for, apparently. I went to the doctor recently and she was not even remotely interested in what was going on with my hormones or my ovaries, because I had some weird stuff come up. And not surprisingly, I've been really stressed over the last few years with the book writing and all that stuff. But so I'm doing all the things I know I need to do, but I wanted to get some blood work done just to see, makes sense. And she was having none of that. So she doesn't test hormones, which is all completely baffling to me as a women's doctor. And she just was like, yeah, well, you're in perimenopause. That's it. And I was like, but what if I wanted to have a baby? So I threw that out there to see if it would make a difference. And she said, oh, well, then that's a different story. And so it's incredible to me how, as you well know, right, we are just vessels for babies, apparently. And our overall health and our vibrancy doesn't matter, apparently, unless we're trying to have a baby. And that is so infuriating to me, because I feel like it just sets women up for perpetual dismissal and, by medical providers. And that's just not okay.
Absolutely. I mean, so much to touch on that. And in fact, today I'm going to a doctor's appointment for something totally has nothing to do with, anyways, whatever. It has to do with my skin. So yeah, it has to do with hormones, but not like actual period stuff. And, I'm not on hormonal birth control or the pill, anything like that. And so I was already mentally preparing going into the doctor, like, okay, I want something to help with my skin. I know it's hormone related, but I don't want to be put on the pill. So I'm making up this narrative of like, how am I going to? And it ended up being, oh, well, I'm just going to tell her I'm trying to conceive. So that way she doesn't put me on the pill. But it's so crazy that the hoops that we have to jump through to and it has nothing, it's not the medical doctor's fault or Western medicine or anything like that. It's just, that's just where our society is at in our evolution.
The whole system. It is the whole system. I completely agree. And it's so unfortunate that, like you just said, you have to, or you feel as though that's what you have to say in order to be taken seriously. I genuinely felt that as well. I couldn't believe it, actually. I really was so shocked because I haven't been to a doctor in a little while. So anyway, point is that, yeah, it reaffirmed everything for me, why we do the work that we do and feel so strongly about educating anyone with a menstrual cycle, what their superpowers are, essentially.
Absolutely. And to touch on that, it's even in books. So like, you're educating women in more of like I would say a obvious educational way, right? And like I'm educating women in more of like a low key, people don't really know they're being educated, and yet they are kind of way. So like in these stories that I write, I weave so much information that I learned from you and others that I've studied with. And one of the things in particular is, just to touch on what you were talking about, is how a lot of women, and it's how it's about how has nothing to do with them. It's just a reflection of our society and what information is being passed down from generation to generation. And a lot of women believe that they can get pregnant literally at any time in their cycle, And so, in my stories, in my books, I'm educating women. No, that's not actually the case. And in fact, the heroine in my book, Calypso's Heart, the first book in the story, the series, it addresses that and addresses why she's not on hormonal birth control and why it's ridiculous for her to be on it when she's not here. Oh wait, that's a spoiler.
I know, don't do that.
In the world, these species is what I'm calling them, these non-humans, they are only fertile every few years. And so it doesn't make sense for them to be on hormonal like contraceptives, because a few days out of a couple years you're going to be permanently on? No, it doesn't make any sense. And so like I kind of touch on that, whether people even realize it or not, or they're just skimming through the pages, I don't know, but it's there for them to possibly get. And like to go back to like emotions, like, so our emotions during the cycle, it's like at any given day. And I guess like by knowing this information, there's like a couple of things, like you can have more compassion, not only for yourself, compassion and understanding, like being like, okay, I'm literally feeling like a crazy ass person today. And like, I'm feeling like the dragon, and I'm going to like totally snap someone's head off and be like, smog, and like go and burn down a village, right? And it's like, just have some compassion when those feelings come up for yourself, but also, sorry to tie it back to stories, when you're reading about characters as well, and you're like, what the hell is this person doing all of a sudden? Like, why are they biting their head off? Like, for me, I'm constantly being like, okay, well, I wonder where she's at in her cycle. And like, I bet she's probably having one of those luteal days of like, okay.
It's so true. That's a really good point. Actually, I was thinking about that too, because I definitely question where women are at in their cycles when I interact with people on Instagram, for instance, because I have a large audience and there are people who are constantly saying things. And there are sometimes where there are a lot of people who are very triggered by something I've said. And I'm like, interesting, because everyone should know is that you tend to be a little bit more triggered in that second half of your cycle versus the first half, where estrogen and testosterone just make you feel so glowy and dreamy, and the rose tinted glasses are on, and life is not so bad. And the thing that your partner does isn't so annoying or at all. And then come like day 26 and you're just like, I'm, like you said, Dragon Week or divorce court. And it really is so, it just, again, all it is calling you to pay attention to something that you might need to address or to potentially fix, or to have a conversation with whoever's in your life about whatever problem that you're feeling is a little insurmountable during this time of your cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, and then once we have an understanding of it, and like you said, Hated knows, and then my partner knows, like he knows, like the other day he was like, okay, well, we're both about to start our period soon. So and I was like, it's so true. Okay, thank you. Thank you. He brought home, what was it? It was, I don't know if you tried it. It's like Halo ice cream. It's supposed to be like low carb, whatever. So he brought home the Halo ice cream. He's like, okay, we're about to start our period soon.
That's
and I'm
sweet.
like, thank you. Like, and then, so the point is like, then they understand. And it's like this, it just really helps level set, because they're just not like, what the hell? Like all of a sudden out of the blue, you just snap at them, but really, it's not like an excuse or anything. It's just honoring literally like us as a feminine being in our hormonal cycle.
Yeah, the ebbs and flows, totally. And what you said is so important, that when it comes to the person you're in a relationship with, and I'm saying hetero, obviously you and I are in relationship with men, but this really goes for anyone who's in a relationship with anyone. Just knowing what your boundaries are during this part of your cycle, because we overgive. As women, we tend to overgive, we overdo, we overprovide, we burn ourselves out at the expense, of ourselves for everyone else. And it's just sort of ingrained in our way of being, in our nature. And as a result, things are not so great in that second half of your cycle when you do this for a long period of time. You're just not as hormonally resilient in that second half, and part of that is, again, our biology, because we've ovulated, so our bodies are going to spend that part of our cycle trying to get pregnant, essentially, if there's sperm available. And so it's going to do whatever it can to support a pregnancy. So you put on a little bit of weight, you feel more bloated, your boobs hurt, you might get a headache, or, your whole body shifts. And it's purely for biological reasons, for evolutionary reasons. And it's not like your body just hates you and it's like, screw you, I'm gonna just rebel against you this part of the cycle. It's really not that. But we have all of these things happening, and what we have to be cognizant of is when we're in relationship with someone else, like, they know what's going on. So communicate to them about what's happening during this time, so that they're not going to take offense to something you might say or do, or not say or not do. And also just acknowledge, like you said, have some grace for yourself, or give yourself some grace, because your body literally is trying to prepare for a pregnancy. and then it's a little disappointed at the end if you don't get pregnant, and it just, sheds, and then you get just your period, and your periods might be really terrible too. I mean, this is the ongoing thing that you and I both see, of course, right, in our work and just in the world that we're in of women's health. And so when that's another sign that something's up. So you might have 2 whole weeks of your cycles, it's almost half of your year essentially, dedicated to pain and suffering. And so that's really our cue to say, okay, like, something's got to give. And usually it is the stress and the burnout. And if we start to say no and take things off of our plate, and freaking ask for help, ask your man for help, ask your partner for help, whoever's in your life, ask for help, because we just can't do this alone. We've been led to believe this story that we can. But at the end of the day, if you're asking for help in that second half of your cycle, you are not going to be so angry and so upset about things, and lose your temper and all these things that show up, and so moody and all of it. So yeah, those are just some things I keep thinking about that show up all the time in my work for women. And asking for help is super hard, and really, really splitting responsibilities so that you don't feel the resentment that comes up in that second half. Because I hear that all the time too. It's like, I'm so angry. I saw this funny video the other day that I thought was really cute. It's kind of a funny tongue-in-cheek way, I think, to communicate to your partner that whatever they're doing is not so great or not acceptable, and how can we do things differently. So it's just one of those reels on Instagram, I think. And this woman got these little baby middle fingers, these tiny little plastic middle fingers. And so she would put one on the clothes that had been left on the floor next to the hamper, and one and like one next to the garbage that hadn't been taken out, or the dishes that they said they were going to do and didn't do. And I just died laughing, because you can kind of bring humor into this and not be so pissed about the whole thing or resentful about it. And it just made me laugh. So I feel like there's ways to communicate these things without creating drama in this phase of your cycle too.
Absolutely.
You like that, huh?
Yeah,
I really need some middle fingers.
I know. I was just thinking, okay, can we get those on Amazon, or like, where are we getting those things? We all need them, like, in our life. Like, we're talking about sex education earlier. Okay, we all need to be they're handing out condoms. No, we need like little middle fingers everywhere. Like,
fingers. I know. Oh gosh, I know. I feel like that should be the packet that you get when you get into a relationship. Yeah, should be in there.
That's so funny. Okay, yeah. So just to tie back to the emotional journey, and then we can kind of wrap things up. But what was I was going to say, so yeah, honoring like where we're at in the cycle. Sorry, this is what I was going to say. As much as we're this is an experiential journey, our periods, and we experience, I think like when we talk about cycles and like you said, we talk about menstruation, people talk about this experience, like I'm feeling the cramps, oh God, here comes the bloating, and then, you know, whatever it is, and the bleeding and all this stuff. But it's like, there's such an emotional experience. It's an emotional experience as much as it is as like a physical experience. And so, at least, I guess, like you were talking about what comes up for you. And for me, it's like when I'm writing these stories, I try and how do I honor this like emotional journey that these females, women are on. And so like in book 3, which isn't out yet, it'll be out in October, but just like the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because this comes up a lot in my stories, but especially in book 3. And it's like, as I was writing it, it's like, how do I honor this emotional experience with these women who are going through these cycles? And so I guess what I wanted to say about that is I guess for the readers, the future readers, you'll see like why that is such a huge highlight for me, is to point that out. And even in book 1, so like if you haven't read it yet, you can go back and read it, but there is this point where so these species are immortal beings, but they're not born immortal. They go through this change, this change. Sorry, I won't bore you, Nicole, but the point that I'm bringing it up,
I'm fascinated by this.
because this change that happens is a very hormones play a huge part in this like cellular change, this genetic change. Oh, it's not genetic change, but it's like a cellular change that these beings go through. And so like it's like, you know how we go through puberty, well, they go through like an immortal puberty. So when they go through this, and you'll see this in book 1, it's right before they go through it, their hormones and everything is all heightened. And you even see this in like other paranormal books, like even if it's about wolves or other things, it's like wolves go into heat, or like people don't really, maybe they don't understand like what's going on hormonally. And we experience that as human beings too. That's like ovulation. That's where we're, you know, our sex drive is likely increased, and we're experiencing this emotional journey of like, okay, we are really turned on. We really want to have sex with our partner. And I guess it's like the parallels between even like a fantasy world and also our humans, because we're animals too, you know, we're animals.
We
So
are.
We go through this, and it's like understanding that we're going through this journey, and that it's very emotional as much as we're feeling like the physical symptoms too. So it's like I guess like sometimes when I'm reading stories, romance stories, I'm curious. I'm like, I wonder if she's ovulating because she's like all up on this guy. Like she's all she can think about is mating with this guy, you know? And it's like, I really wonder if she's ovulating or not, and like where she's at. And even like, okay, sorry, just to talk, but one of the characters in my story, so she goes through her change, her immortal change, and then immediately after I'm thinking like, okay, so it's kind of like ovulation, so she's kind of like, you know, really in the mood and all this stuff, and then she goes through her change, and then immediately after she goes through this reflective period, like a major reflection period, not only because like, hey, I just turned into an immortal, and what does this mean with my life and all the things, but it's like there's a parallel with that, you know, that was a parallel of like, okay, and now what's the reflection, like you were talking about, it's the buildup, it's the oh my God, I just became an immortal, and now it's the okay, what does this mean in reflection. And so it's just this, like you said, this emotional bell curve.
It really is. It's so true. It's a good point, actually. I'm trying to think, as you were saying this, I was trying to think of a story I've read really ever where this is talked about. And, you know, we're talking about the hormonal fluctuations that happen throughout the menstrual cycle, or even through the life cycle of, you know, of a character who is going through the menstrual life cycle, and they're going from teenagehood to 20s, 30s, and later. And I can't think of anything. So I feel like your work is so unique in that sense, in that regard, because you're talking about this, and it's so true. I mean, it makes a lot of sense when you think about characters and their development and what, you know, what they're going through on a daily or weekly or monthly basis as you follow them through the storyline. And there's never any conversation about that. And it's such a critical component of a female's life. And it so defines how we respond to external stimuli. So it's really interesting that you bring that up, and this is part of your storytelling, because it really is so unique and so needed.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
just for people who think they're going to read my stories and get like like blips of like this, you're now the characters in the Luteal. No, I don't go into that. It's just like an unspoken parallel of like what's happening. And so like for instance, the heroine in book 1, you'll get to see where she's approaching her change. She's approaching her change. And so she doesn't know this is happening with her body, but like as an observer, as a reader of the story, like knowing these additional layers, it's you'll see her and she's like, she meets her mate, and of course they're fated mates, so of course they're like attracted to each other anyways, but she's like on like overdrive, and it's because her hormones are literally about to go into the peak of her immortal cycle, and she's about to change into literally into it. And then she goes into this, you know, afterwards period, and she's in the reflection, and she actually snaps at her partner, and they get into like a fight, and they do all, and so it's like it's just very it's unspoken parallels, but if I feel like the teachings are there, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, totally. No, it really does.
And it's not like, sorry, just another caveat. These immortal beings, the Specians, have okay, whatever. If you're watching this is a bit of a spoiler, but they have their pregnancies are not like human pregnancies. So they're like 13 months, and it follows more of like they have quarters, not trimesters. But even so, I'm still weaving in like things that I've learned from you. And so you're still getting like an experience while also having like a totally different world. And you'll see.
It's like the supernatural version of pregnancy and menstrual cycles.
Yeah, and you'll see a lot about this in book 3, and it's and I also get to, I think like you'll understand like why characters sometimes, or even human beings in real life and real relationships, sometimes you're like, wow, I'm really digging this guy, and like, why am I so obsessed with him? And like, just, you know, you're, or whoever it is you're attracted to, and just you're on overdrive, and then like 2 weeks later you're like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, what was I thinking? Like, no. And the way that he eats that food bothers me, and like whatever, you know.
Yes. You know, that brings up something that I did want to say prior to this, and it was that the person you're in a relationship with as well, you know, I remember, I'll backtrack and just say years ago, Hayden and I wrote this article for Mind Body Green, and it was about, you know, the men's guide to the menstrual cycle, or something cute and tongue in cheek like that. And it's really important for the men in your life, whether you're in a relationship with one, or it's a brother or a father, or just anyone really, to know this information. They're not really taught this. I mean, we're not given any of this information. They're taught even less. And their understanding of it is so much less than ours. And for them to just really acknowledge that you're in this phase of your cycle. And, you know, as we joked about you, me, and Luteal, as that's Hayden's tagline, you know, it really is something for the men in our lives to acknowledge, and just to honor that. You know, if you show up a little bit differently, it takes the edge off. It really changes how a woman feels in that part of her cycle and her life. And so just consider that if you step up in a different way, even if you bring her flowers, truly, that will change the game. Maybe not for the whole week, but for the day at least. You know, so if there's a way for you to show up a little bit differently, you know, because we're kind of hot and cold during that time. It's, you know, we have the ongoing joke of the luteal phase is like, oh, well, I want you to hug me, but I don't want you to hug me too much. And, and so it's just like that. Ask her what she needs and she'll tell you. And I swear it will change your relationship and change your lives pretty much. So I just want to add that in because I feel like it's so important for the men in our lives to know this. And they just have no idea. They're like, I don't know what to do. It's overwhelming.
Yes, absolutely. And like some of the male well, not some, I would say almost all the male characters. And I think one of the readers even said like, I love that my pen name's MC Solaris. I love that MC Solaris's male characters are like low-key feminists. And I was like, I never thought of that before, but okay. And so I was like thinking about it. And even like what you were just touching on, even when this, they know, I guess I'll say it like this. So like they are, in the one example of the female going through her change, she was like, what's happening to me? Like, why am I feeling like this? And she's literally like, I don't know. And he was like, you're going through your change. Like he knew it and he understood it. And he was like explaining to her, like, this is totally natural and it's totally fine. And like, here's what we're going to do. And like, and so it was like, it's amazing that men can have so much, they always think like women are, what is it? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus or whatever. But it's like, if you just understand I guess like what you were saying, it's the men's guide to menstruation. Right. If they really understand it, they hold like a lot of power. I don't want to say it like that, but they hold this like additional power of being like, okay, wow, this is how I could like up level in my relationship, or this is how I could be more understanding of like, yeah, she just snapped at me for doing something totally stupid that I do every day. It doesn't matter. And then all of a sudden she snaps at me for it. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to snap back because I really understand. It's not an excuse to like take over and like, abuse the power, but it's just like, still have to apologize, be like, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snap at you. But, it's like, we understand where it comes from now,
Right. Yeah, I know, right? If men could just not take it personally and push back, that's where I think the real power is, because you're able to diffuse a situation so much faster than you ever would have been able to if you didn't have that data. So ladies, share your charts, your cycle information on your apps with your partners, like write it on a calendar that's hanging in the kitchen, whatever it is you need to do so that you guys are on the same page. And it truly is game changing. There's really no other way to say it.
Yeah. And also having more compassion with yourself too, and being like, instead of beating yourself up for however you just reacted to whatever phase in your cycle, right? Like, wow, there's no way I'm doing a burpee today. There's just no fucking way, right? Like, and just be okay with that and be like, hey, I'm on my period. It's okay to say no to the burpees. Like, it's fine. Or like, if you, like we've been talking about, if you snap at your partner or whatever, like, don't beat yourself up over it. Like, just understand like, oh, okay, like this is where I'm at. And like, oh, I'm not surprised we got into a fight last night because X, Y, and Z, and I'm literally starting my period in a week, or whatever it is. It's just like you were saying, this is just it's a powerful tool for all of us to know and learn and understand, to not only like help us understand and have more compassion for ourselves, but also in our relationships and how we show up in the world and with other people.
Amen to that. I completely agree with you.
Amen. Okay, so I feel like we should wrap it up there. And I guess before we wrap it up, Nicole, I don't know did you have any other parting thoughts or anything?
I think I just want to remind everyone who's watching that it may feel, especially with the maybe lack of education and understanding of how your body works, that your body is just a separate entity to you in a way, and that it's just this thing that's decided that it wants to make your life difficult. And it really isn't that. I want everyone to take away, or the one thing I want everyone to take away, is that your body is just communicating with you, and it has this way of doing it that may not make any sense at all. But when you actually tune in and listen to the messages that it's sending, it can be really life-changing, and it can allow you to see that, like I'd said before, maybe this relationship isn't working, or I'm in the wrong job, or I'm living in the wrong place, or I got all of these messages in my 20s and I had to make major changes in my life because I was going down that path of 2 weeks out of every month, I was raging. And so I've done this from experience. And so I know that it's hard to face that sometimes. And I think we have to put down stepping stones to get to where we need to go. And so hop from one to the next until you get to the big goal. But acknowledging that big things, maybe like relationships aren't working or whatever it is really critical to maintaining your sanity throughout your entire menstrual cycle. So I just want everyone to remember that your body is not rebelling against you. It does not hate you. It's not like, I'm just going to punish this person this month. It isn't doing that. It's truly just a reflection of your environment and your overall health.
Absolutely. It's like this, it's a secret language. And it's not so secret, but I mean, if you're not aware of it, but anyways, the point is it's speaking to you. It doesn't have a voice box or anything to like talk to you, but it's speaking to you in the way it knows how. And so it's just paying attention and listening. And for anyone who wants to know more about that, or if you're curious to learn more about basically all this that we've been talking about and so much more, Nicole goes into, I mean, she has amazing programs. That's where I started with her. And I highly, highly recommend them if you're feeling called, or even if you're just like, I want to know more about her. Where can we find you?
Yeah, I know. Thank you. So my website's nicolejardim.com. So that's my name. You can find pretty much everything on there. There's programs, there's my blog. There's also my podcast, The Period Party. And I'm on Instagram. That's Nicole M, like Madeline Jardim. I share a lot on there as well. And I have a book called Fix Your Period, which you mentioned in the intro. So really, I have a lot of different resources for people who are curious about what might be going on with them and want to dig a little bit deeper. So you can start with my website, go to the quiz. It's a period quiz. It'll help you kind of figure out what's going on and make recommendations from there.
Thank you for educating women. Thank you for educating me. And I am doing my best to help put that forward to other women. So
you are.
Anyways.
Thank
All right.
you.
So thank you.
Much.